So clapping for sync. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sky happy, Scar? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to welcome Prime Minister Trudeau and Prime Minister Rutte to London. During the excellent meetings that we've had today, we reaffirmed that our three countries stand shoulder to shoulder against Russia's barbaric invasion of Ukraine. In the 12 days since Russia launched this illegal and brutal assault, the world has come together in solidarity with the indomitable people of Ukraine. Last week, 141 countries, nearly three-quarters of the entire membership of the United Nations, voted to condemn Putin's war. And 39 countries, including the UK, Canada, and the Netherlands, voted to refer Putin's actions to the International Criminal Court. This is the largest such action the court has ever seen and will allow the chief prosecutor to open an investigation to ensure Putin cannot commit these crimes with impunity. As Ukrainians resist Russia's onslaught with courage and tenacity, the international community must aid their struggle in every way that we can. We will only succeed if the whole international community moves together with the same spirit of unity that we've seen in recent days. Justin and Mark and I have been discussing that today, and later this afternoon I'm going to be speaking to the leaders of the United States, France and Germany further to coordinate our actions. To aid these efforts, today the UK is joining our Dutch and Canadian friends to mobilise more practical and sustained support for Ukraine. Our new International Ukraine Support Group will coordinate the efforts of the international community to provide long-term and unwavering assistance now and in the future. And we will be encouraging more countries to join us. This is the moment for Ukraine's friends to create a coalition of humanitarian, economic, and defensive military support to ensure that Putin fails. And that's why today I'm announcing a further £175 million of UK aid for Ukraine, $100 million of which will be provided directly to the Ukrainian government. This brings the total UK support announced during this crisis to around £400 million. After 12 days, it's already clear that Putin has made a miscalculation. He has underestimated the Ukrainians, their heroic resistance. He's underestimated their leader, and he has underestimated the unity of the West. And we will continue as colleagues to do everything we can to strengthen that unity in the days ahead to ensure that Putin fails in this catastrophic invasion of Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister Johnson, for hosting. It's great to be joined here by Prime Minister Rutte as well. It's been a very productive first day of my trip to Europe. We've been focused on solidarity with partners and allies. We're focused on stronger economic ties, jobs, growth, and support for the middle class, but also, obviously, for standing up for democracy against authoritarianism and standing with Ukraine every step of the way. This morning, I was able to have an audience with Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II at Windsor Castle. We congratulated her, obviously, on the Platinum Jubilee and was able to talk a little bit about the situations we're facing and draw on her long experience for having seen much over these past decades. When I met earlier with Boris, we discussed stronger security ties, continuing to defend our shared values, continuing our work together on advancing free trade and creating more middle-class jobs, and also on climate action, where we need to build a sustainable, secure future. I also had a bilateral meeting with Mark Rutte, where we talked about the enhanced importance of NATO, continuing to work together to fight disinformation and protecting freedom of the press, and continuing to work strongly with our friends in the European Union. But of course, throughout, the focus is on the people of Ukraine and our solidarity with Ukraine, our pushing back against the illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine, and standing up for democracies around the world. Le Premier ministre Johnson, le Premier ministre Rutte et moi avons parlé de notre réponse commune face à la Russie. On se mobilise pour répondre à la crise humanitaire. On insiste pour que la Russie implémente un cessez-le-feu pour protéger la population civile. Et évidemment, on insiste que la Russie met fin à son invasion et quitte l'Ukraine. Canada, UK, and the Netherlands are close defense partners. We're working together to mobilize the global community to step up to support Ukraine, and we'll continue to defend democracy and the values that underpin it, and continue to make sure that Putin is held accountable. Today, Canada is announcing new sanctions on 10 individuals complicit in this unjustified invasion. This includes former and current senior government officials, oligarchs, and supporters of Russian leadership. The names of these individuals come from a list compiled by jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny. These sanctions put increased pressure on Russia's leadership, including on Putin's inner circle. This is, of course, in addition to all the other sanctions we've announced, including our recent announcement on imposing massive tariffs on Russian and Belarusian imports. The work we're doing together is punishing Putin and his enablers where it hurts most, in particular by crippling their financial systems and sanctioning their central bank. So far, in aid for Ukraine, Canada has sent about $1 billion worth of financial assistance and humanitarian aid, but we have more to do. Demain, je serai en Lettonie pour rencontrer le Premier ministre Karins, d'autres dirigeants et le secrétaire général de l'OTAN, Jens Stoltenberg. For today, we continue to stand with Ukraine, united and strong.
Thank you.
We are here today as close transatlantic NATO allies. Throughout history, our countries have always been closely linked. And in times of crisis, in times of war, we stand shoulder to shoulder. And so today, as war and violence once again cast a dark shadow over Europe, we are working together for peace and security on the European continent. And I'd like to thank Prime Minister Johnson. Boris, I thank you so much for bringing us together today at this timely moment. Because it has been another weekend of horrific violence in Ukraine. We knew it already, but in recent days it has been confirmed that Putin remains unmoved. We are dealing with an aggressor who keeps crossing new boundaries. Civilians and civilian targets, and even a nuclear power plant, have been attacked recently. And we know now that Putin has used cluster bombs. We can only guess what he plans to do next. But one thing is certain, Russia's aggression must stop. And in our meeting this morning, we again stressed the importance of unity. To all Ukrainians, we say this: your courage and your resistance, exemplified by President Volodymyr Zelensky, deserves our utmost respect. Your resolve is our resolve. We will continue to stand by you. In the past few days, aid and military supplies have been sent to Ukraine from the Netherlands, as well as the UK and Canada. And we will continue to do everything we can to help Canada. The Netherlands is prepared to consider, and we are all prepared to consider, all possible sanctions that can help put pressure on Russia. And obviously there is a lot of debate going on about energy sanctions. And here we should not make a mistake. We have to ensure that they don't generate unmanageable risks to energy supplies in European countries and beyond, including Ukraine, as has also been stated today by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and I think rightly so. So that means that we still need European companies to continue their work towards Russia. And that is important. And of course, what we need to do over time is to make sure that we reduce dramatically our energy dependency on Russia. That's clear. Finally, I am pleased that there is a broad international agreement on the fact that possible war crimes must be investigated. We must document everything that points towards human rights violations now, so that when the time comes, we can prosecute and try those responsible. Peace and justice must win out over violence and injustice.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you, Justin. Let's go now to the media. Gary Gibbon, Channel 4.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Could you elaborate perhaps a bit more about the energy discussions and where they're going. The US Secretary of State said there are active discussions for an oil ban from Europe. It sounds as though you don't feel that's the case, Prime Minister. And you, Prime Minister, your views are characterised in the newspapers this morning as saying the West should have a climate change pass. Should we bust through the caps for a while in order to insulate Europe from Russia, whether it's going to turn supplies off or we're going to walk away from them in Europe? And one quick one, if I may, to you specifically, Prime Minister, on refugees. Whether the numbers are still 50 that have come to this country or have gone up a little. It seems like they've only gone up a little. Isn't that embarrassing?
Thanks. Well, let me just before I bring in colleagues on the hydrocarbons issue, I think there are different dependencies in different countries, and we have to be mindful of that. And you can't simply close down use of oil and gas overnight, even from Russia. That's obviously not something that every country around the world can do. We can go fast in the UK. Other countries can go fast, but there are different dependencies. What we need to do is to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction and we all share the same assumptions, and that we accelerate that move. And I think that is what you're going to see, and you've heard that from leaders around the world. And actually, I see no inconsistency, by the way, in moving away from dependency on Russian hydrocarbons to moving away from dependency on hydrocarbons altogether. And you can see how this will encourage the world to go, Gary, for green solutions wherever possible. But clearly, there is going to be a transitional period. We're going to have to look for supply. We're going to have to look for substitute supplies from elsewhere, and we're going to have to do it together across the entire coalition of countries that is now condemning Putin's actions. And on your point about the UK's reception of refugees, we are absolutely determined to be as generous as we possibly can. And as I speak to you all, we're processing thousands, clearly, of applications. Clearly, as the situation has got worse, we are going to have to make sure that we do even more. And the routes that we have, that already the family reunion route offers the prospect of hundreds of thousands coming here. The humanitarian sponsorship route is also uncapped, and we're putting people out into all the surrounding countries, into Poland, into Bulgaria, Romania, as well as into Calais, to France, to make sure that we receive people and we help people to come. Don't forget, the UK since 2015 has been the most generous, and with great respect to Mark and all other European colleagues, we've been the most generous of all European countries in settling vulnerable people. We took a large number of Afghan refugees, as you remember, under Pitting, and we will, and 104,000 Hong Kong Chinese have applied under our scheme. We will be very, very generous, as the people of this country would expect and would want, to people fleeing the war in Ukraine. And I know that's going to be the instinct of the British people. But colleagues, on the hydrocarbons.
Well, the painful reality is that we are still very much dependent on Russian gas and Russian oil. And if we now would force European companies to quit doing business with Russia, that would have enormous ramifications around Europe, including Ukraine, but also around the world. So we have to dramatically reduce our dependency on gas and oil from Russia. That will take time. A statement earlier today by Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, I think, was in the same direction. So the painful reality is there. And that means that we have to be very clear and make no mistakes here. This is a step-by-step approach, and that means that we have to make sure that the energy supplies in this part of the world, again, including Ukraine, but also in the rest of the world, are not hindered, and that will take time.
I think what is clear is that many countries have realized that continued reliance on Russia's oil and gas is a problem for the future. And what we're seeing with the solidarity and the unity not just of countries and democracies across Europe and North America, but indeed countries around the world looking at trying to secure more reliable sources of energy, particularly green sources. What we're seeing is a shift in Europe and elsewhere to understand that Russia is no longer a reliable partner. What Vladimir Putin has broken here is a trust where I've heard a number of Europeans reflect on, it's too bad that we are so dependent on Russian oil, but we're not going to make that mistake again, and they are moving away from it. Canada imports negligible amounts of Russian petrochemicals and oil. We've banned that, but we are, of course, self-sustainable in terms of oil and energy, but we will be there to support as the world moves beyond Russian oil and indeed beyond fossil fuels to have more renewables in our mix.
Thanks very much, Gary. Raymond Fillion of TVA.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Au cours des derniers jours, il y a plusieurs pays qui ont fait savoir qu'ils s'apprêtent ou qu'ils vont annoncer des augmentations importantes de leur budget militaire. L'Allemagne vient d'annoncer qu'ils vont passer de 1,4 de son PIB, qui est le niveau canadien, à 2 Ma question, que va faire le Canada? What will Canada do with regards to its military spending right now? If you can answer in both official languages.
Comme vous savez, il y a plusieurs années, on a mis de l'avant un plan pour augmenter nos investissements militaires d'à peu près 70% au Canada et on continue de suivre ce plan, mais on regarde attentivement les besoins et la réalité de la situation. On a un budget qui s'en vient, nous sommes en réflexion sur les investissements qu'on doit faire, mais on reconnaît à quel point c'est important d'assurer que nos forces armées ont les outils nécessaires pour protéger le Canada et participer pleinement aux missions de l'OTAN où on a toujours été. On est en train de regarder ça. As you know, a number of years ago we put forward a defense plan that included increasing our defense spending by 70%. But we also recognize that the context is changing rapidly around the world, and we need to make sure that the women and men who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces have all the equipment necessary to be able to stand strongly, as we always have as members of NATO, and we will continue to look at what more we can do.
Thanks very much, Justin. Fleur Lansbach from NOS.
Hello. I have a question for Prime Minister Johnson. Last week there was a journalist in Poland that asked you, why do Ukrainians have to flee their homes? Why are their children taking the hit in this war, while Putin's friends and his inner circle are still living in London's most beautiful houses and taking their children to private schools? I was just wondering, has anything changed since that question was asked?
Thank you very much, Fleur. Yes, it certainly has. And I think that if you look at what we've done just today with the economic crime bill, we're taking steps to ensure that we whip aside the veil of anonymity that obscures the ownership of the properties that you described. So you can no longer use a bogus company to conceal your ownership of a property. Where we are making sure that we have new powers to distrain, to take people's assets, and we think that will have. We think that the whole package of measures that we're putting forward today will have royal assent in just a few days' time. So we're moving very, very fast on that. But Fleur, I hope that our viewers and all of you will recognise that is in addition to the huge work that the UK has done together with Mark and with Justin on the big package of international sanctions. And if you look at what we did on together on SWIFT, what we did on the Russian central bank. It's already had a profound effect, and I think I'm right in saying that even today the Russian stock market is not opening, and there's not a testimonial I necessarily seek, but I observe that the Russian Foreign Ministry said that the UK had not been entirely helpful in this regard towards their own economic interests, and I'm sure you'll have seen what she said, and we are going to continue to work with colleagues to ensure that we tighten the vice around President Putin's regime. Look, what's happening now is that the president of Russia is plainly doubling down. He's decided that he's going to continue with an all-out onslaught on centres of habitation in a way that we think is utterly repugnant. It's clear that we're going to have to do more, and as friends and partners, that's what we're going to do. I don't think that question was for anybody else. Let's go to Jason Groves from the Daily Mail.
Thank you. You've all had some success with your sanctions. They're squeezing Russia, but they're also having an impact here. We've seen the gas price treble. We're seeing petrol prices heading towards £2 a litre. What would you say, Prime Minister, to people who desperately want to help but are worried about that? Can you give a commitment now that there is going to be more help on the way? Mr Trudeau, can I ask, is Canada ready to increase its oil and gas output to help wean Mr Rutte and others off that Russian gas? And also, you've seen the Queen today. How is she? We've not seen her for a while. Is she fighting fit?
Jason, look, a really important question that I think everybody is going to be thinking. That everybody's seen what's happened to the price of oil. This matters deeply, which is why I think what Mark had to say earlier on about the need to proceed in steps is correct, and we must do everything we can to protect consumers and the public. There are going to be impacts. Let's be in no doubt there are going to be impacts, but I think that it's the right thing to do. But we've got to, and it's the right thing. It's completely the right thing to do to move away from Russian hydrocarbons, from dependence on Russian hydrocarbons. But we've got to do it step by step. So far, the success of the West has been in the unity that we've shown. I think we're all increasingly united in the view that we've got to move away now from Russian hydrocarbons. We've got to do it together. We've got to make sure that we have substitute and substitute supply, and that's what we're working on as well.
And is there going to be more help on the way?
We will do everything that we can to ensure that we have substitute and substitute supply. So one of the things that we're looking at is the possibility of using more of our own hydrocarbons, and you'll have heard already what the business secretary has had to say about licenses for UK own domestic production. That doesn't mean that we are in any way abandoning our commitment to reducing CO2. You can do that, but we've got to reflect the reality that there is a crunch on at the moment. We need to intensify our self-reliance as a transition with more hydrocarbons. But what we also need to do is go for more nuclear and much more use of renewable energy. And I'm going to be setting out an energy strategy, an energy supply strategy for the country in the days ahead, so that people have a sense of how we're going to meet people's needs over the short, medium, and long term. Marieka, sorry, Justin, sorry.
It's all good. What we learned over the past couple of years is that global challenges have impacts domestically. COVID crisis was a perfect example of disrupted supply chains that led to significant inflation challenges around the world. We made a promise to Canadians that we'd have people's backs, and that's exactly what we've been focused on. The challenge right now of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine is having ripple effects around the world, not just in energy prices for Canadians and for people in Europe, but for people in the global south as well. Disruption of the UN food program, disruptions that are happening that we are going to have to adjust to, and we're going to have to make sure we are there for each other. And that is the focus that we have as partners, but it's why we've all been reaching out around the world to talk with fellow leaders about the challenges they're facing, the challenges their people are facing. Because what we are learning about Russia's unreliability as a trading partner needs to be remembered, but we also have to work together to provide substitutes, to provide alternatives. And of course, we need to move forward to decarbonizing our economies, but we need to do that in a way that supports people through that process, and we're going to continue doing that. In regards to Her Majesty, I have the particular privilege of having known Her Majesty for about 45 years now, and I can tell you that in my conversation with her this morning. She was as insightful and perspicacious as ever, very interested in what's going on, asked me all sorts of questions about Canada, and we had a really useful, for me anyway, conversation about global events, as we always do.
Thanks very much, Justin. Okay, Marika Walsh from the Globe and Mail.
Good afternoon, thank you. A few questions for all three of you. You're talking about this humanitarian coalition. What exactly is that? What good will it do for the people of Ukraine concretely? And regarding sanctions, Prime Minister Trudeau is announcing more today, but we haven't seen it actually change the behavior of Russia in Ukraine. So is enough being done on that? And Prime Minister Johnson, particularly for you, you spend more than the 2% target in NATO. Canada spends well less. Is that acceptable to you?
So, do you want to have a go at that first?
Go
okay,
for
thank
it,
you, Marika. Marika, thank you very much. Look, yes, it's true. We spend about 2.4% now. Look, I think that Canada is a fantastic ally, friend, and partner, and I'm not going to make any comment on Canada's approach, except to say this: that I do think that the world is clearly changing, and I think that what we can't do post the invasion of Ukraine is assume that we can go back to a kind of status quo ante, a kind of new normalization in the way that we did after the invasion of Crimea in 2014, or the seizure of Crimea and the Donbass area. We've got to recognize that things have changed and that we need a new focus on our collective security. And I think that is kind of increasingly understood by everybody. And on your first point about what the humanitarian coalition, look, I mean, the whole world is now coming together to try to help avert a total catastrophe in Ukraine. It's already very, very grim indeed. We're doing everything in our power to prevent it from getting worse. And one of the most important things is to look after people fleeing the war zone, and all of us in our different ways are doing a lot. And you'll have heard the sums that we've announced today to help the immediate vicinity and what we're doing to take people. I know that both the gentlemen who are here with me, their countries have a fantastic record of humanitarian help.
Well, on defense spending, we decided early January, when the new cabinet started to ramp up defense spending by billions of euros. And that will bring us close to the 2%. And probably we need to do more, particularly given what has happened over the last 2 weeks. But the Netherlands will spend a lot of extra money on defense, and I think rightly so. The Humanitarian coalition, I think it is crucial that this is not only NATO, European Union working together, but that it is the whole world coming together to defend the basic values and the international legal order as it has been established after the Second World War, and which is now being challenged by one country invading the second biggest European nation, being Ukraine, being invaded by the biggest European nation. So this is a huge event, and this has huge impact on the whole world. And we have to bring together Africa, Latin America, Asia, everyone who wants to be part of humanity, to be part of such a humanitarian coalition. And yes, I agree with you. The sanctions so far have not had the desired effect. They have a huge effect on Russia. They are not against the Russians, but against the Russian leadership. But of course, it will have an effect unavoidably, and ultimately also on individual Russians that we cannot prevent. And I think in the longer term it will have a big impact on Russia. It will also have an impact on how they will move forward. But you are absolutely right. At the moment, in the short term, it has not led to the result that they stopped the invasion. That's true.
But that's why we are resolved in being there for the long term. The courage of Ukrainians in standing up to the Russian invaders has inspired and humbled us all. And we need to show ourselves as determined to push back against Putin, against the Kremlin, as hard as we can and as effectively as we can. And that's where, I mean, from the beginning, Boris and I and a couple of others were pushing so hard on SWIFT, on the central banks, on the Russian central bank, including going after their ability to draw on their reserves, something that even a week ago we didn't think would be in the cards, and yet seeing just how strongly democracies around the world have stood and responded, I think is a surprise to Putin, perhaps a little bit of a surprise to all of us as well, that we actually can stand and push back really hard for the principles that drive us. And quite frankly, the unprecedented display of support of 141 countries at the United Nations supporting this resolution means that as we move forward, this is, of course, about Ukrainians and Ukraine, but it's also about more than that. It's about standing up for the rules-based order that has led to unprecedented peace and stability and growth around the world over the past many decades, and the pushback that one, like Russia, like Putin specifically, cannot overthrow those 75 plus years of peace and stability and still benefit from the economic largesse and growth that comes with that. And that firmness is not just Western democracies like us. That is something that we've heard in our conversations, all three of us, with partners around the world who don't have the same kinds of ties to Ukraine, but are very, very concerned about the violation of the rule of law, the principle that suddenly might be right once again, the principle of territorial integrity, respect for sovereignty, the kind of neo-colonialism that Vladimir Putin is trying to impose upon Ukrainians. That's not going to fly. And the strength and the resolve of countries around the world to say, no, this is a moment to stand for democracy against disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, and to stay true to these values that have led to respect and prosperity around the world that we continue to need to fight for, including in many different parts of the world, whether it's Afghanistan or elsewhere as well.
Thank you.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
OK, excuse. Mais plus court. Nous savons qu'on a vu une démonstration extrêmement forte aux Nations Unies de 141 pays qui se sont ralliés. Ce ne sont pas tous des pays qui ont des liens étroits avec l'Ukraine, comme le Canada ou beaucoup de pays européens. C'est des pays qui ont indiqué que le respect des principes de l'ordre international, des partenariats et de la stabilité qu'on a bâtie au courant des dernières décennies est importante. C'est des pays qui se rassemblent pour ces valeurs, ces principes qui ont mené à une prospérité, et la Russie ne peut pas violer cette paix et penser profiter de cette prospérité. C'est un moment important pour le monde de démontrer qu'on est là pour se tenir debout contre la violation des principes fondamentaux.
Thank you very much, Justin. Last question is to Joost Dobber of Financieel Dagblad.
Thank you. You have all stressed the importance of unity in the Western response to Russia. But when it comes to energy sanctions, there seems to be a big difference between your position and the position of the United States, with Secretary of State Blinken coming out in favor of an oil ban, and also saying that there are advanced discussions with the Europeans about this. Was the American Secretary of State wrong to say that there are advanced discussions? And Prime Minister Rutte, can you please also elaborate what the discussions you are having in a European Union context are about this? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so let me just say quickly that no, I don't think Tony Blinken was wrong in the sense that we're all together now moving very, very fast and seeing that something that perhaps 3 or 4 weeks ago we would never have considered is now very much on the table. We have to consider how we can all move away as fast as possible from dependence, reliance on Russian hydrocarbons, Russian oil and gas. And everybody's doing that. Everybody's on the same journey. Some countries will find it faster and easier than others. That's all. But we're going to do it. We're going to do it together and we're going to work together on making sure that we all have the substitutes and the supplies that we need.
I agree. And if so, in that sense, it is a step-by-step process, and we have to make sure that we deleverage our dependency on Russian gas and Russian oil, whilst acknowledging at the moment that that dependency is to a certain extent still there. And if we would force companies to quit doing business with Russia in that realm, that would have enormous consequences, because it would basically undermine supply chains the world over, particularly in Europe. It would also have an impact on Ukraine itself. And therefore, my plea is to do this diligently and not overnight, and making sure that we speed up the programs in all our countries to decarbonize, to green our economies. It makes it more important to do that.
Okay, everybody, thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues, very much indeed. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Thank you.
Have you sanctioned Abramovich?